Welcome to another episode of Nacoa's Lunchtime Lives, a series of live interviews where I speak to people that have advocated for COAs and Nacoa alike. Now, these normally go out on one of our social media platforms, and in this case, it was on Instagram, and I spoke to the incredible Megan Ace. Now, Megan talks a little bit about her journey of what life was like growing up with her father, who had an issue with alcohol, and how when she eventually shared her story online, how she realized the power in doing so can help other COAs. We talked about what life looked like, the impacts that it had on her and the people around her, and we looked at Megan's relationship with alcohol and how that affected her, and how she's gone on to do Dry January this year and what she learned from that. Like every episode, there's so much to take away from this, and people were watching on and resonating with the things that Megan said. If this is the first time that you've ever been here, please make sure that you have subscribed and turned on the notifications so you know each and every time that we post a video. And I really hope you get as much from this video as I got from partaking in the interview.
There she is.
Yay, good afternoon.
How you doing?
Very well, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm good. I'm looking forward to this. I'm looking forward to
me too. Me
seeing
too,
where
Josh.
we go.
And so nice to meet you.
Yeah, likewise. Likewise.
Thank you.
How are you feeling?
You know, I haven't done one of these for like months, so I hope it'll be okay.
It'll be brilliant. It'll be brilliant. It can't not be. So
Oh, bless you.
why don't we, to get started, why don't I give you the opportunity to just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do in the world so everybody knows who you are.
Okay, well, I live in Worcester with my husband and 2 kids, and I am an interior designer and stylist, and I do a little bit of blogging here and there, and that's how this all started. My dad obviously was an alcoholic and subsequently died from it. But when my son was born, it kind of reiterated and brought up loads of those feelings that I think I'd probably kept locked up inside for a number of years. And anyway, I decided to write an open letter to my dad as a way of kind of dumping some of those feelings. And I put it on a blog, and it just kind of blew up. A few people picked it up, like BBC Radio 4, Women's Hour, I think, like a number of people anyway who shared it. And from there, it just built traction, I suppose. And I was so shocked by the amount of people that are affected by it, either struggle with alcoholism themselves or they have a child who it might be an alcoholic or a parent. So I think it resonated with a lot of people and far more than I had anticipated.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a little bit of a backstory anyway. So
yeah. And I think a lot of people actually who share openly, particularly like on a blog and that for the first time, just don't realize quite how many people are out there that have been touched by this, right? I actually think nearly everybody knows somebody, right, who's struggling with it, somebody connected to someone in some way.
Yeah, absolutely. And since putting it on yesterday, again, some of the private messages that I get, it's, oh man, it's just so upsetting.
Yeah.
And I think like now, even more so in this pandemic, I think children, particularly young children, you know, obviously now I'm an adult, so I can control it a little bit more. But for children growing up in a household with an addictive parent, I think must be just awful. So anything that we can do to help that, I think, I know you have a fantastic helpline. I think it's just fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why the helpline's always like remained so important, like the central focus of what Nacoa do, because just so many of these children really are sort of unreached, you know, they're sort of, because I think there's always a perception as well that anybody that's struggling with this, like, looks a certain way and would be really easily noticeable. And that's not always, you know, it's more than often not the case. So
oh man, no. And that whole, and I think I read it, I was listening to someone on one of these lives actually with you, that whole kind of functioning alcoholic is almost like an oxymoron really, isn't it? Because actually you can't, I mean you can be, but actually there's no such thing as functioning, because you know it is so destructive. And you know, witnessing my dad's demise, he was an incredible man, and you know I know I get so much of my better qualities from him. He was an amazing wordsmith. He loved writing. He was incredibly bright. But I think he just needed escapism, and that escapism turned into an addiction. And, you know, my mum always says, I think he probably always had an addictive personality. So whether it be cigarettes, alcohol, he eventually then got on to heroin. So, and he said to me, he tried it for the first time for an intellectual experiment, which for me it blew my mind, because, you know, it's the one thing that you would just think it's just pure evil. Like, why would you need that? And he did that classic thing of, he tried it 6 months later, he tried it again, or 6 weeks later, 4 weeks later again, a week later, and then before you know it, was just under its spell and would spent hundreds of thousands of pounds on it.
Yeah, somebody's just saying here, I can't see the name. It's a society's biggest secret. In every school there'll be children affected by this, but so little training, not mentioned on teacher training or even on child site training that I'm currently doing. And that's been our experience as well, by the way. And we think, you know, a lot of the statistics show that it's 1 in 5 that are living with a parent.
Yeah, that's awful. I think that's just heartbreaking. And I know some people, it is a controversial subject, whether it's a choice. I don't think addiction is a choice. I think it is an illness. And I know that unlike cancer, something like cancer, you don't put cancer in your system with a drink. Like, as an alcoholic, you are doing that action. But I do strongly think that it is an illness, because I don't think anybody would wish that they were an addict. So I think anyone would want to change if they had that choice. But I think alcoholics, you just don't have that choice. Of course, you would always pick your children over the bottle, but in a sound state of mind. But if you are under alcohol spell, then I think it's just impossible.
Yeah, I think it sort of defies logic in that sense as well, right? Because it's almost, I totally understand and resonate with what you're saying, but it almost, if you try to look at it logically, it doesn't make sense, does it? Like, no. You know, like you say, obviously you would pick your children over the bottle, and it's like, it's not a choice, it's an illness. But then on the flip side of it, you talk about picking up the drink. And I think it's like many different mental health conditions, right? I think if you struggle from depression, you don't choose to do that, right?
No, so no, exactly. And until you've been in that dark place, thankfully I never have been, and I just don't think you can sympathize almost. But I do think it's another fallout of this pandemic, because I was taking counselling for it last year, and those counselling sessions for me were fantastic, because I do think there was a little bit of post-traumatic stress for me. I think particularly because the timing of my dad's death was so horrendous. It was the night that my son was born that I had the news that he was literally upstairs in the same hospital as me, dying whilst I was giving birth, at quite a hard birth as well. And I think, you know, that dealing with those emotions was something that it was awful. And I've lost my track of mind now. Can't remember what I was saying.
Wait, let me ask you: was it your first child that was being born when he died?
Yeah, my first one. Yeah.
Because
I'd last seen my dad when I was about 2-3 months pregnant. He had been admitted into hospital, so he knew I was pregnant, but he was very poorly at that point. And then when I went into labour, I was in hospital, and my eldest brother was my dad's next of kin. So my eldest brother got the phone call to say, Jonathan, my dad has been admitted to hospital, but he'd left a note saying, do not resuscitate. And I think, so all the family agreed not to tell me in that moment. And then, so I found out the next morning, and then the nurses were amazing. So they wheeled me up to his bedside so I could say goodbye. And we got my middle brother who lives in Amsterdam on FaceTime. So, you know, there was humor in that moment too, but I think then dealing with family members coming into my room in the hospital, holding my baby, to almost like release emotion and not use my son as a prop, but I think for all of us, it's like that complete circle of life where upstairs we're saying goodbye to a family member, and then downstairs welcoming one into the world. It was just unbelievable timing. But almost in a way, I was just like, yeah, there you go. Just having the final word again, making this about you. And I think that's okay too, to be angry in that moment. And I've always, my counselor said this too. He said, I think you're intellectualizing the addiction too much. Allow yourself to feel anger towards him. He kept making me say it. I'm getting choked up now saying it. But it was just such a release of emotion when hearing somebody say that you can be angry and that's okay.
Yeah. And listen, I sense the emotion that's coming up. And I think what you've explained there is some of the like core messaging in the Nacoa message, right? That goes out there. And it's one thing that I learned from the first day that I found Nacoa, and I did the same, the intellectualizing. My dad was an addict. It wasn't his fault. It was an illness. It was never, it wasn't a choice. He didn't mean to. It was nothing to do about how much he loved me. And I did all of that to hide from myself some of my true feelings. And they were the difficult ones. And you're allowed to feel desperately angry and let down by somebody that you love very much. Yeah. And I think it's a concept that as people, we're not very good at allowing, particularly with parents, right? We don't allow children to that space to feel both of those emotions, to feel let down and angry by someone. Yeah.
And I think just having someone... Oh, go on.
No, go on. You finish.
No, I just think that for the first time, I think hearing somebody say to me, you are allowed to feel angry and it's not your fault and you shouldn't feel guilty. And he made me say it about 3 times. And it was just, honestly, the release was just incredible. And I think, again, with us reiterating that message, okay, I intellectualize it in that it might be his fault, but okay, there is no choice. But it is just like, oh man, you can just release that. It felt magic and really cathartic.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot to be said that, but there's so many mixed emotions when it comes to this stuff. I think that a lot of people talk about the sense of relief as well when it's finally over, and then the guilt that follows that sense of relief. And how do you vocalize it?
That thought of, thank God I don't have to deal with you again. And I went out quickly this morning on a site visit to check on a project that I'm working on, driving through town, and I was thinking about obviously the upcoming chat with you. And I used to sometimes see my dad in town and I would literally run and hide. And if I flip back like that, I can remember that gutting feeling inside, that like rush of anxiety of seeing this shell of a man that I love but once knew. And it was literally like looking at a homeless man that was a stranger, and I would literally hide with my best friends or whoever I was with and walk the other way. And I still feel guilty. I still feel guilty about that, because also I sometimes think, I wonder if I would have been able to change him in that moment. But also now understanding that you just can't, like addiction just devastates so much. And there was a point, particularly when I had my son, when I was pregnant with my son, I just thought I have to self-preserve here and I have to ring fence myself. And as soon as I became pregnant, like I was speaking to somebody last night on Instagram messages, like your armor becomes even harder because you become so much more protective, because whether willingly or not, they destroy and destruct absolutely everybody around, including them. And I think the disease becomes cancerous because it affects absolutely everybody around them.
Yeah, and it's, again, what you're talking about is just such importance for people to understand, because I think I speak to so many people that are affected by this, particularly, adults that are affected by a parent, and they're often seeking help. And when you give them the advice that you have to kind of put yourself first, right? And it's almost like it's not really your duty to go and try and save them. I think is one of the hardest things to get your head around. Because we're often so compassionate as well as COAs, right? Because we've been tuned into it all of our lives. But you know, that ability to save is not something that we possess, I think, as much as we all wish that we did.
So Josh, was your mum around as well when you were growing up?
Yeah. So my mum was there, yeah.
But not an addict?
No. But obviously, I think one of the things another thing that I had to explore, and I didn't explore until I was well into my adulthood and on my own sort of journey of healing, was how I felt let down at times by her too, right?
Yeah.
And I think some of that was even harder because she's never had an addiction problem. She's an incredible woman, you know, very kind of loving and all that, and's always done her best. But sometimes I had to explore some of the struggles that I had with that as well. And, you know, in a society that sort of only ever wants to make sure that you love your parents with no discrepancies, right? It's really difficult to kind of explore that stuff in a loving way. What's your relationship with your mum like?
Oh, she's like the queen. She's absolutely formidable. She's amazing. She's outstanding and has never really spoken ill of my dad. Like, you know, I think she'd probably kill him if she could have done herself, but she would never speak ill of him. And she's always I don't know, I'm lucky because I'm a pretty positive thinker, and she kind of reiterates that as well, and has always I understand that I get, like I said at the beginning, some really brilliant qualities from my dad as well, and I think she recognizes that too. And I also sometimes think it must be really hard for her to witness maybe some of dad's traits or similarities in me and him. And I've got two older brothers as well, so you know there's going to be similarities there. So I think, you know, for her it must be really hard as well, because she was helpless in it too. But she always says, like, even since they were younger, he would always be the one to drink more. He, like I said, I think probably always predisposed to an addiction. So whether it be 60 Marlboro a day or heroin or whatever, just looking for that next hit and escapism from he just couldn't live in the real world for some reason.
Yeah. No, my mum was very similar, and always wanted me to remember my mum for the good man that she remembered when she married him, right? So she would like almost blank out everything else and be like, he was brilliant, you know. And I think sometimes that I took on a little bit of a responsibility because my dad died when I was 9, so I took on a bit of a responsibility as a child where I saw, oh, my mum wants me to love my dad and not see any of the bad, so I had to kind of push down the bad. And really, I think that's why community becomes so vital, and things like Nacoa are so important, because I don't think anyone in my mum's position could have the capacity, after everything that she had experienced, to be able to hold space in a balanced way that let me explore everything. And I just think it's so hard for people that are really close to do that. And I think that's why any kind of external support becomes really valuable, you know, for kids particularly.
Have you got brothers and sisters?
Yeah. So I've got half brother and sister from when my mum remarried later, but so I've got an older brother and a younger brother that we that grew up with my dad in that environment. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
And by the way, we have 3 completely different experiences.
Really? Yeah, that's interesting too.
Yeah, which is quite important, because I always sort of measured myself up against my brother, my older brother, as in he seemed to just float through life and not be that bothered by it, and I was clearly troubled.
But I think even that communication is key. But I hope he doesn't mind me saying this, but my eldest brother, I think still holds a lot of anger inside for my dad. But I tend to think with anger, like, it's only you that suffers if you're angry now, because what's the point? Like, try and kind of direct it into something positive. So for me, doing stuff like this, which I think is kind of a positive out of a horrific situation, I think that's the sort of stuff that's in my control, rather than just being angry is so damaging, really. Yeah.
I think there's a level of having to work through the anger as well. Like, I was angry all my life, but I never ever aimed it at my dad. And it wasn't until I found Nacoa, and I remember saying to Hillary, the CEO, I remember saying to her, I've never been angry, never felt angry at my dad. And then I was like, as I said it, I thought, that's not right. That's not right. And then I realized I'd been angry all my life, but I just aimed it at everybody else, right? Because I didn't want to break the idea that I had a loving relationship with my father. So rather than be angry at him, I was angry at the world, or turned it in on myself. So, but behind all that anger was when I kind of started to work through it, behind it was sadness anyway.
Yeah, of course. But I just hope with kids, you know, particularly with schools closed, I just think all those points in the day that would allow them escapism from home life, if it is horrific, I just think it's awful. This fallout that will continue from this pandemic is just horrific. And I just really hope that there's children out there that will either use your helpline or talking to, as long as they have somebody to talk to about it, then that's crucial. Yeah.
And I hope as a society, when we do come through this, that we reinvest in children, because I feel a little bit like they've been sacrificed through the last year, really, to protect everyone else a little bit. Do you have the letter that you wrote with you?
I do. I'm so organized, printed it out.
So do you want to? I would love you to read it. Yeah, if you feel like you can.
Okay, I've got to be really brave. I can do it though. Yeah.
Yeah. If it gets too much, just stop.
What? I just cut you off?
Just cut me off. Yeah, just go.
Yeah.
Put yourself first.
Bye, Josh. Okay. You ready? Here goes.
Yeah.
Dear Dad, your drug and alcohol addiction, which led to your final destination and great escape, for me made the arrival of my son terribly hard to comprehend. After a very long and complicated birth, I too was to experience the all-consuming drug, which had been your consumer, your master, for so many years. I thought about you, and for the first time understood how it must have instantly transported you to what you thought was a happier place. After my adoring, doting husband and my incredible mother, your ex-wife, had gone home, I embraced my son with the warmth of 1,000 suns, and I thought of you. How proud you'd be of your only darling daughter and your brand new, unspoiled grandson, merely hours old. In the face of sheer exhaustion and overwhelming feeling of love so raw it's painful, I decided to share my news with you. Having not seen you since very early on in my pregnancy, I composed my message and send you the text. A text which you would never receive, a text which when it bleeped beside my mother's bed, she would once again have to absorb my hope. Unbeknown to me, you went into hospital as I did during the early hours. My fatherly-like brothers had asked Mum and my husband if he thought I should know of your situation, and he quite wisely said no. Another impossible decision your addiction has made one of my loved ones make. I found out that you were upstairs breathing via a ventilator the morning after I'd given birth. The wonderful nurses and midwives gave me the option of taking me to say goodbye to you and to hold your hand for one last time. What devoted angels. I felt so lucky to be in their overwhelmingly precious and selfless care. Sadly, my youngest of two brothers, your second son, was not able to be so lucky in finding his peace with you. Travel, timings, and the fact that his wife had given birth to their second son, your fourth grandson, a mere hours earlier, made it an impossible task for me to say goodbye, although the wonders of FaceTime really are underestimated. As my biggest brother, your eldest son, on his broadest of shoulders, wheeled me up to your bedside, I cannot for the life of me recall what I said to you. Only how I wish you could have met our king of a son, or at least known that he had arrived safely. I know that you would have cared deep down inside, even if those battled demons wouldn't have allowed you to show us. There was, of course, humor in that moment too. How we find that in the most surreal situations never ceases to amaze me. As I get ready to give birth once more, I'm thankful that I won't have to endure the emotional ordeal of your death again. But I also know that none of it was your fault. Even through so many years of emotional turmoil, manipulation, and guilt, I have no blame. I'm sorry that you have missed out on so much. Your 3 children, 5 grandsons, and now... Stop! Okay, no, I'm going to keep going. And 6th grandchild on the way. And I'm sorry I couldn't have saved you. I witnessed such wonderful qualities of yours in your grandsons, and I know how much they would have just been just absorbed in your magical stories, as the three of us were, and how richer their lives would have been if you could have played a role in them. I wish that you could know of your inheritance track, which has been passed to my son, and of the angels guarding him while he sleeps, just as you promised they always did for me. I wish you were alive, and I wish you hadn't been an addict. Angels guard you, Dad. P.S. It's a girl. Boom.
You did it. So, firstly, well done.
Thanks.
What? I'm supposed to be interviewing here, and I'm a little bit like I've only got sort of swear words coming to my head at the moment.
Oh.
How does it? Let me ask you. How does it feel reading it out like that?
I think like actually dipping back into it all the time really is so helpful. Like you can, obviously I can't get through it yet without feeling emotional, but still I think actually having done that and dipping back into it is a really good way to get rid of some pent up emotion or release some emotion.
Yeah.
I think all of that is helpful, particularly because even reading it out loud is different from reading it to myself, because sometimes you just kind of skim it, but actually reading it out loud allows me almost to connect with that emotion and allows me to sit with that emotion a little bit, and it be okay to find it upsetting, or there's angry moments, or realizing, okay, well that stuff is bound to have an effect on some of the things that I do today. So, you know, all of that I think is good, even to write these things down. And writing an open letter for me was incredibly helpful.
Yeah, and I feel it as you read it out. I think one of the most important things that I've certainly done over the last few years of kind of processing my dad's death, because he died when I was 9, right? But I never sort of even opened that can of worms until I was about 25 when I found Nacoa, really. And it's so useful to release that emotion, because I lived a life that taught me for a number of different reasons, that whenever that emotion came up, I had to abandon it and kind of push it down. So I think, like you say, that process of actually letting it come out, realizing that it doesn't kill you, because when I feel it come, sometimes you're like, I don't think I could bear it. Right?
Yeah, you like shut it down. But do you know what?
Yeah.
Like, it's okay. Just go with it. It's all right.
And you know, I think we talked about addiction and what it is. I think if you can imagine that fear of feeling emotion, times it by 1,000,000 and attribute it to every single feeling that you ever experience, I think what you reach is addiction, right? Because you reach, give me something so that I don't have to experience that. And that's why I think, by the way, when we talk about addiction, that we're all somewhere on the spectrum. As somebody who had problems with it myself, it's been 9 years since I ever touched any of it, right? But I'll still reach for a full tub of ice cream, and I'm doing the same thing, or I'll run into the office in my life today instead of running into the pub, but I'm doing the same thing. So I think we're all on a spectrum. I just want to take the time. I just want to read a couple of these, right? Because of when you were reading out, I'm just going to go back to, right, I think it started with a couple of people putting crying emojis, and then, oh my God, as you were reading, truly beautiful and painful. I can feel every word. Well done, Meg. Someone's put every time with a crying face. There's people have put clapping hands. Well done, Meg. Amazing. Well done. Thanks again for sharing, Meggie. You are amazing. Oh my gosh, that was so heartfelt, so bravely read. Gosh, I'm in floods. Absolutely amazing. I read it when you first posted it. It feels so much more emotional today listening to you say it. And I'll tell you that, by the way, I read it 5 minutes before we came on, because I read it about 2 days ago, and I thought I won't keep it together if she reads it live, so let me read it 5 minutes before and let some of the emotion come out. And then when you was reading it again towards the end, I was just thinking, I've got to say something to Meg in a minute when she's finished.
You did really well. We did really well.
You did really well. You did really well to do that, to bear that in that way, knowing that you're kind of, you know, everybody's watching. So there's a couple of things that I do want to pick out based on what you said. The first thing I do want to ask you is, was your dad this way, for want of a better expression? Was he? Is that ever since you can remember? Did you have? Was it like he was amazing, and then things got worse when you were a teen, or?
Oh, do you know what? My memory from my childhood is so bad. I'm really bad. It's shockingly bad. I can't really remember him around. I think he left when Mum and Dad got divorced when I was about 8 or 9. So
Okay.
I remember very little before that. He was incredibly involved, incredible storyteller, the sort of guy that you would walk, he would have everybody in that room eating out of the palm of his hands. He was just a magician with words and speaking, and I think so. Yeah, so he left when I was about 9, and then since then I think he was drinking more, and then quite quickly became an addict, and I saw him less and less and less.
Yeah.
And then he would go into hospital, he'd come out clean, and of course, you know, the NHS is absolutely bursting at the seams, but I think what he would do is he would go in, get fixed, and then because there's no exit strategy afterwards, he would go back into his life before, and then would just mix with the same people, get vodka from the same shop, and I think then he would drink, and then of course then you feel guilty, and then he drinks to drown out that emotion, and then of course it just becomes a complete vicious cycle. And then you're stuck in that, and then he would arrange to meet me, or I'd do a big shop for him rather than just give him cash, and then I'd see him a couple of times, and then it would stop. So yeah, I think probably the relationship started to go I started to have less communication with him from about the age of 10, I'd say 11.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And then a little memory before that, and I think that's true for a lot of people, actually. By the way, is that struggling to recall the childhood. Piers has asked, did you find that becoming a parent raised issues from or sent memories of childhood flooding back? I mean, yours is kind of a bit like out there in terms of the birth happened to be on the same day as the death, right? So I guess it kind of did. But did becoming a parent bring a lot back?
Not really. I don't think so, because I can't really remember stuff from my childhood. I suppose the only thing I think, and I still think now, is that I wish my children could have known him, or I wish that he could have played, like I say in my letter to him, played some sort of role in their lives, because he was just magic, like I say, at storytelling. He had such a special soul, and I think I do miss him from that point of view. But I suppose from like how I parent or conjuring things up from childhood, not yet. My children are still quite young, 7 and 5. So maybe when my son gets to the age that my dad was when I left, maybe that might, hitting milestones like that might conjure up some things, but I don't think so.
Yeah, that happened to me. Not to
Really?
scare you, but yeah, when my dad died when I was 9, and I saw some pretty bad things when it happened, and I'd grown up thinking I don't really remember my dad, right? So my first daughter, mind you, was born when I was 18. So right. I hadn't, like, by the time she was 9, I was still like in complete denial of everything, right? I was in like nowhere near recognition of what had happened, but when she turned 9 years old, I realized it made me go, oh my God, that's how old I was when I saw those things. And it made me really like.
And I bet you thought how tiny she seems.
Yeah. And defenseless, and how loving she is of me, like how desperate she is to please me and all that kind of stuff. So I think some of that did affect me, but like I say, that's some of the stuff that woke me up to it. Like, I feel like you're a lot more awake than I was at that stage of my life. I was still saying my dad was brilliant, and I never saw, had any struggles. So, since then I sort of realized it was a lot different to that. Hussein has said, it's funny how we are conditioned not to show emotion and can see doing so as weakness, when the truth is that showing emotion is actually a massive strength, and in doing so we free others too. Like what you've done in sharing that letter will be so freeing for other people. And Hussein said he's so glad that you did this today and made yourself vulnerable, such a role model. And Amanda says it's interesting that you say you can't really remember much from your childhood. This seems to be a perpetual, I can't say that word, I might not have said it right, perpetual problem for COAs. You're doing awesome, by the way. Yeah, so it's very common. I have a theory on it that's to do with less about not remembering and more about detaching, because it was probably so difficult.
Yeah. And
when
I
we
think,
were younger.
with going back to my counselling sessions, I think they stopped on about session 7 or 8. And I think we probably would have started to dive deeper into that. And he taught me a couple of techniques, actually, which I might share with you, because they were really helpful in certain situations. So one is it's called the 5-4-3-2-1 technique, and it's a grounding technique. So if you ever feel yourself becoming anxious, or particularly children at home that might feel overwhelmed with things, like it's something that you can have which is in your control. And these 5 things can flip depending on where you are, the situation that you're in. And I think you pick, so it's in your mind, you pick 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can smell, 3 things that you can hear, 2 things that you can touch, and then 1 emotion. And then you can flip them up depending on, like I say, where you are. But I always thought that was really good, because it kind of brings you back to the space.
Yeah, I love
that. The other thing that he made me do on my last session, actually, was I had to draw. Imagine a piece of paper in a kind of landscape like this, and then I drew just a line like this in the middle, and he made me put, depending on either if it was a happy memory or a sad memory, put my happiest memories from my childhood up here, and then the kind of darker moments down here. And I think, again, for children, that might be a useful tool to do. Even, I just want to reiterate that I'm not a professional at all. These are just some of the things that I've picked up along the way. But I think however you kind of dump those feelings, and kind of seeing them like that on a piece of paper and then being able to discuss them, I think is incredibly useful. But yeah. I do think we would have probably got to that stage in my counselling, but because of COVID, it had to stop.
Yeah, it's such a shame with the COVID as well. There's so many people are saying stuff today. Clifford said, appreciate your strength and resolve, Megan. Tamsin, I think it is, says, do your brothers have similar feelings, or do you think it's different for you because you were his only daughter?
I think that's a good question. I think a little bit different. I think my eldest brother probably took on probably more than he should have. He was probably knew too much. I think differently for each of us. Like I say, I think probably my eldest brother has the most resentment, and that's probably because he was shielding my middle brother, and particularly me. My middle brother, we're extremely close, so I think that's helpful, just to share how we're feeling. But we're all pretty positive. But I think for my eldest brother, it's been most difficult for him because, like I say, he absorbed a lot of the pain, I suppose, and took it for me.
Yeah, and I do think it's really important, particularly if you start looking at like the family roles that people often play within any kind of dysfunction, for want of a better word. You often have quite different experiences for the reasons that you've expressed. Like your older brother may have had to do quite a lot of shielding, which means he's going to, going to have experienced life a lot different to maybe that you would have done.
Yeah.
And somebody said that they used the technique that you just talked about, and it truly does help. Something I want to pick up that you said in the letter that I kind of noticed, and it might lead us on to talk about some other things quickly, because I can't believe, by the way, that 40 minutes has already gone. At the beginning of the letter, and I have got the letter in front of me as well, I can't remember what you said. It sounded to me like you were alluding to the fact that you related to his relationship with alcohol a bit.
Oh yeah, it was more heroin, because not that I took heroin after I gave birth, it's methadone.
Right.
So for that for me was so I had to have an emergency cesarean section. So I had this 24-hour labor, but my son was like, he went back inside. He was like, I'm not ready yet. So I had to have an emergency cesarean section. So you're given something called Oromorph for pain relief. And it was that feeling of bang, it's just gone. Pain, feeling, anything that you might have felt is just completely disappears. It's unbelievable. And
it cuts off the pain receptors, doesn't it? Like morphine, rather than working in the ways other painkillers work, morphine like just disconnects you from the pain, right?
Unbelievable. Yeah, that's kind of what I was alluding to with that, is that I know heroin is a dirtier version, but it's I figured that I kind of could, for the first time, almost appreciate that escapism.
Yeah.
On a completely another level.
Yeah, but I mean, it's, you know, again, it's very similar, isn't it? I was in hospital once for an injury that I had on my foot. This was going back years when I was still drinking. And I was given morphine on a drip, and on the drip I had a button to administer it myself.
Were you controlling it? Oh man.
Yeah, and this button would go red, and then you couldn't press it until it went green again. And I think I just sat there for hours like that. As soon as it went green, I'd press it again, right?
Yeah.
But I remember even in the state that I was in back then, I remember after a day or two, I said to the nurses, like, you need to get me off this stuff because I'm like, it's sending me, I'm too on it. I'm obsessed with it.
Yeah. Well, I know, I love Louis Theroux, and have you seen his documentary about, what are those painkillers that were prescribed? Basically, medics were kind of chucking the scripts at people with these. Oh man,
I'll think of the name in a minute. Yeah.
Can't remember.
I know the painkillers that you mean, though. Yeah.
Yeah. But that kind of, and then people got addicted to them, and then it kind of went underground. So I can't remember what they're called. Oh man, no, not codeine. Yeah, opioids, that's it. Yeah, so I think, you know, that kind of chucking these things about like that so loosely is oxycodone. No. Yeah.
Everyone's coming in with different versions. A lot of some of the things that will start coming in are different versions of opioids as well. Exactly. I was trying to think of a specific tablet as well. What about your relationship with alcohol?
Oh yeah, so I've just done dry Jan.
Yeah.
Which actually was a hell of a lot easier than I thought. I enjoy it sometimes, but I'm always aware that I don't want to fall into its control. Mm-hmm. And I can kind of see throughout December particularly, and now with homeschooling, I was using it a little bit as that crux between the day and night, because we're in the house all the time. It kind of, that 6 p.m. wine turned to like 5 p.m. and using it again, you can see how easily it would be for it to become a habit and then an addiction, because you kind of want it. I was using it to separate my evening from my daytime, because especially now when everything is kind of rolling into one. But yeah, I enjoy it. So, but I think I don't think I have an addictive personality. So do you think? No,
I don't anymore. I haven't drank for 9 years, but only because my relationship with it becomes so well, I was an alcoholic basically.
Yeah.
I drank, like a fish. But I think, the important conversation around alcohol needs to be a real conversation about alcohol, because the reality is that it works.
Yeah.
I'm not here 9 months sober because I think it's rubbish.
Yeah.
I'm here 9 years nearly sober because I loved it so much, because it did everything for me.
Yeah.
And I think for me it was to do with my level of kind of wounding as well, right? But just because I don't drink alcohol, it doesn't mean that I haven't for the last 9 years tried to find different ways to escape the ways that I feel.
Yeah.
And I think we're all looking for that.
Yeah, of course.
And people ask me, do I miss it? And I say, I don't miss it. there are days when I miss having something that was just in a glass, that if I took it, it took the edge straight off and I didn't have to kind of work on that stuff. Do you know what I mean? So I think if people can have a healthy relationship with it, then I really don't see a problem with that. And I think particularly when we're trying to raise awareness for COAs, the last thing that we need to do is start sort of alcohol bashing, because then
I think but I do think it's frightening how it's marketed, and particularly now I've noticed in this pandemic, like the only way to get through homeschooling is gin, or the only way is 5 o'clock somewhere. Like all of these tiny little subliminal messages that we're all picking up. I think if you have got a trigger point, I think it can be really damaging. And I know I've probably done it before, where, oh my God, I need gin. Yes, are the kids in bed yet? Or it's maths, time for a gin. All those things that are associated with it. I do think it's dangerously kind of attractive and on trend to be kind of gin o'clock, like, you know, or like Fizzy Friday, all those little things where it's, if you have got an addiction to it, it's kind of reels you in. Like, oh man, if you want to be cool, if you want to be with the yin gang, then you have to have gin at 3 o'clock on a Friday. And I think that's where it's dangerously enticing. And particularly, I think the government is to blame. And I also think supermarkets are to blame, because they sell this vision of, okay, drink this, have this, and you'll have a better time. And particularly it's, you know, it's generally on promotion. I think those tiny little sayings that you see on posters, like gin o'clock, wine o'clock, all those things that I think, like I say, if you have got a problem with it, then I think it can be extremely damaging.
Yeah, I think particularly some supermarkets were literally shuffling you through the alcohol aisle in their one-way system. It was the only way to get out. So it was almost like they used to do with sweets, where they were putting it by the aisle to make sure that you'd got it. I don't know. I think not just alcohol. I think the way that we market bad stuff, gambling, I think is actually the same. I think the same is probably true for sugar as well, right? The way that it's all marketed. But I do think the kind of trend in the way that it's a reflection of society's relationship with alcohol, the way that the whole wine o'clock thing, I think a lot of it is harmless. I think, like, you know, like you said, you've probably said it before, and, you know, yourself.
Like in my mum's groups at school, it's just banter, and it can be funny sometimes, but it also can be triggering, I think, too. Yeah. So you've got, it's about that word balance, right? So did you learn anything about dry January? Why did you do it, firstly? I did it because I felt like I was getting into a bad habit with it. I did it because I said to my husband on New Year's Day, I think I might do dry Jan. He said, no way will you be able to do that. And I was like, okay, yes, okay. And you know what? I think doing it, I felt like I was getting chubby as well. So bad to say. I felt like my cheeks were like I was just getting bigger, and they're just empty calories, aren't they? And I kind of wanted the challenge, but you know what it's given me is control in amongst this global pandemic where everything is out of our control. It's given me something that's been relatively easy to, like I say, to be in control over, and I think that has been a really, really positive thing for me. I think what I do suffer with is a bit of anxiety, and I think alcohol completely heightens that. And if I've had a drink, even if I've been like partying with some mates, a few drinks, I will always wake up bang, like 3 a.m. with a rush of anxiety, which is probably either the sugar, my blood trying to digest all the sugar, my organs trying to digest the sugar. And I think, you know, my sleep has improved massively, and I don't know. I think I recognized that I was drinking too much anyway.
Yeah. Do you think your relationship with it has changed as a result?
I think it probably will do for a little bit, but I don't think I had a problem with it. It was just kind of, I got into that December habit really of just drinking, well, too much really.
Yeah, I think that's, you know, it's so good to see somebody talk about it in such a balanced way. That's not like, you know, you don't have to be one or the other. You can just go, you know what, I do kind of like it, but I keep an eye on it. And
Yeah.
I
Well,
did.
I have really good fun on it with my mates. You know, it's one of our mates has got a cocktail making company, so we got a couple of cocktails delivered from him, and you know, I still it's fun sometimes to do, but also again, there's a balance, isn't there?
Yeah, and that's true with most things, isn't it? Most things that a lot of things that we do that are fun,
Yeah.
if we do them
Yeah.
too much, are not fun.
Yeah,
Really.
but do you know what? I think I would have found it harder had we been kind of living in normal times, like going out for dinners or parties or mates' houses for gatherings. I think that's where I'd find it hard to turn a glass of wine down, or a gin, or a cocktail, or a, I don't know, espresso martini or something. I think that's, you know, for me, it brings joy a lot of the time with my mates. So I don't know if that's a bad thing or a good thing, but I think had life been normal and going out to events or work events, you know, all those things that there's a glass of fizz, none of that is happening, obviously. So I think it was kind of easier to do it now than whilst events can't happen.
Yeah. So maybe if we're out of the pandemic next January, no dry January for you.
Probably not. I feel like
You've done it now.
I've done it, and I can tell myself I can do it. So now it's like, yes, okay. I've still not had a drink in what? Well, it's only 2nd of Feb, isn't it? But
Oh, okay.
we'll
So
see.
you haven't had a drink yet in February?
No. Well, and I'm trying to be like, okay, don't drink 4 or 5 nights a week. So maybe take a drink on Saturday or Friday or something like that. But again, with this pandemic, I've tried to kind of make our weekends different from our week, so it doesn't just roll into one like never-ending mesh, really. So I think, you know, keeping just alcohol to 2 or 3 nights a week, all those sorts of things. But what's most interesting, and even like switching it up. So rather than saying don't drink, sell it as more of a positive. Say like, do you know what? If you don't drink, you're going to save this many calories a day. If you don't have that couple of glasses of wine, you have got 500 calories that you've banked there that you haven't consumed. So I just think, you know, spinning marketing like that a little bit it probably should be dived into a little bit more, maybe.
Yeah, there's some really cool people in like have you heard of Be Sober?
No.
I think it's BEE Sober. They're like concentrating on how fun sobriety can be, rather than saying focusing on drinks really, really bad, you've got to stop it, give it up, take it away. Rather than saying that, just focusing a little bit more on how fun and how good and the positive sides, like you've just talked about, of being sober. And I think that's like a really Sober Dave's another guy. I don't know if you've seen him. He's on Instagram, does some really good stuff. We're coming to an end. So if there's any more questions from people, I want to invite them just while I ask you a couple more, because it'll chuck us out on 1 o'clock. I can't believe we've done 55 minutes.
Does it do that? I didn't know it did that.
It chucks you out after an hour, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Although I've never been chucked out, I just believe that it does. I think that it
maybe
does.
It's a myth. Maybe it's not a thing. Maybe it's just a myth.
Well, yeah, I think it might be. I think it may also depend on your followers as well. So if you've got loads of followers over a certain amount, then it doesn't throw you out, maybe.
Right. Okay.
Clifford said sometimes being sober and watching your mates being drunk is fun too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, you know,
sometimes it's also awful as well.
Clifford is a guy that we met when we were on honeymoon in India, and he is now like such a dude that we just keep in contact with. It's so nice.
Oh wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. So let me ask you this kind of deep question. If you could go back and speak to, I'm going to say the 10-year-old you, what would you say?
You can't change him. Like he has to change himself. So don't worry. Don't feel guilty. That's the number one, because it is absolutely not your fault. And if anybody is going through this at home, if you have got a mum or a dad who is fallen into the palms of addiction, it is absolutely not your fault. So it's okay to be angry. It's okay to be sad. It's okay not to feel anything. But please just talk to anybody about how you're feeling. A family member, a close friend, anybody that you can trust, or pick up the phone to you guys. But I think that's what I would say, is that it's, and to any other 10-year-old child, it is absolutely not your fault.
Yeah, wow, really powerful. Rosa said, how did you find the first year after losing your dad and being a mum? I'm in the year of being a mum and losing my mum.
Oh man, I'm really sorry, Rose. That's just awful. I think probably for the first year, I concentrated absolutely everything on looking after him. So directed it into, I didn't really allow space for my dad in that moment. It's only really when I was probably, I've only had counselling for the past 18 months, 2 years, which is what, 5.5, 6 years after he died. So it took that time for me to realise that it probably was having an effect.
Mm. Would you say on that, would you say you sort of almost consciously parked him and some of the maybe grieving that you needed to do and said, I'm going to focus on raising my son until I'm ready? Yeah,
exactly that. I wasn't ready. And to open up those battle wounds. I just, there was something, I just felt there's somebody that needs me more than my emotion. Yet, like there's a baby here that needs me to be his number one. And that was kind of a decision. And then I realized that actually these locked up feelings are having an effect, and now it's my time to deal with that.
Well, that's really incredible, actually. That's really, like, as a piece of advice, I really like that you can park it and say, you know what, I know it's there, but I'm going to come back when I'm ready, because right now my son needs. That's really hit home for me. Rosa said thank you there, and Kerry, one of our ambassadors, has said thank you, Megan, for sharing, for your amazing honesty today.
Thank you, everyone, for being so kind. That's really nice. Yeah,
there's been lots of comments coming through, and luckily we've been able to read many of them. Particularly for me, the moment when you was able to read the letter that you wrote, I was really something I'll definitely remember.
Thanks,
particularly
Josh.
because I nearly fell apart.
Oh, you've been gorgeous. You did so well. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. Honestly, I just wanted to say how grateful I am, and I'm sure everybody else is, for you doing this. I think, don't underestimate how important this is. Don't underestimate the way in which the things that you've said will reach people, because I know you won't, but I just think it's important to say, because people need this. They need this space. And so for me, it's a massive thank you. And I'll just if there's anything else you wanted to say before we close it down.
No, but thank you to you guys for being here. You're amazing. And I've had a few questions about whether or not it's available afterwards. It is available to watch again, isn't it, this?
Yeah, so this will stay on the Nacoa Instagram grid. So it'll be on the Nacoa Instagram page. And then within a certain period of time, what peers will do is edit this up so that it goes on YouTube as well. So then it's shareable, so they don't need Instagram to see it. And peers often make some little bite-sized clips of it as well. I think he's got some catching up to do in terms of getting some of them out. But yeah, this will go straight on the Instagram profile, so it's there anyway.
Okay, but thank you so much for having me, and thank you everyone who's stayed and listened, and thank you.
Thank you, Megan. You can see it says here, well done, brilliant, thank you for your authenticity and honesty, and there's some clapping emojis as well. So look, finally, I'll just say thank you again.
Thanks,
I really appreciate it.
Keep in touch, and honestly, I'm really happy to come back.
Well, look, as I've been telling people more recently when we've done these lives, this has almost become a bit of a Nacoa initiation. So once you've done a live, you've passed and you're in. That's it now. You'll be getting contacted, more often now to do stuff. So that's it. You're fully part of the tribe.
Good, thank you.
So, all right.
Thanks, Josh. You take care.
Take care. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.